Begin transmission. Hello, everybody. It is Chris, aka Starrapter, here with the full crew. Tonight we got Milton, and Ben is returning once again for NRM Transmissions. This is episode 171. We're in the doldrums of the fall, as we all know, right? Not a lot of Star Wars news, but there's some very interesting topics. Variety has a really interesting article that came out this week about Superfan focus groups. So we're going to dive into what that could mean for Star Wars and the future of the entertainment industry, plus some cool collecting news as well, and maybe some more stuff. So that's all we're going to get into this week on the podcast. How's it going, Ben? We missed you last week. You did chime in on the chat. Me and Milton had a great lively discussion last week. If you guys missed it, check out 170. But how you been, man?
Good. Yeah, that was a really good discussion with you guys last week about the whole Acolyte budget situation. That's always very interesting to see the more and more info that comes out about that series. But yeah, for me, it was a really good couple weeks. And yeah, it's just great to be back on the show to talk Star Wars. It's always a great way to end the weekend. Just sitting here talking about whatever new topics there are in this galaxy or outside the galaxy. But yeah, just excited to be back on here and, get back into the swing of it again.
Yeah, it's Halloween time, and more we're seeing more decorations that have Star Wars, right? Like they had those inflatable AT-ATs and different things like that. So I haven't seen any personally yet. I don't know if you guys have seen anything in your neck of the woods as far as Star Wars lawn decorations or anything like that. Obviously, we're going to see plenty of kids walking around, hopefully with Star Wars costumes on. But hey, it's just that time of the year,
Oh, yeah. It's always a great time of year for that sort of stuff. And, this October Halloween season's always fun to see those different decorations and things.
Oh, yeah. So what's happening, Milton?
Nothing much, man. Ben and I were talking a little bit about life prior to the podcast and what's been going on, but just been adulting, getting things done around here. Always excited to be back on the podcast to talk Star Wars. As you mentioned, this is the dog days of, Star Wars reporting that happens. So that's why we just have interesting conversations, throughout the year.
Oh, yeah. You go back to my buddies at the Star Wars Underworld. And these guys are the OGs. If you don't know already, these guys have been podcasting for over a decade, and they were podcasting well before the Disney buyout, which means they weren't really working with a whole lot of news on a weekly basis. So they themselves are even, hearkening back to the old days, as they say, where it's like, yeah, we would talk about an actress or an actor just commenting on their wanting to be in Star Wars. And that would be their entire hour or 2 hour long episode would be them just like talking about an actor saying something about Star Wars, and that's all they got. And then we've been spoiled rotten with, especially I think it was a year or two ago where we had even like 2 shows happening on the same week, and it was like, oh my gosh, there's too much stuff going on, blah 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 blah. So Star Wars, as we've said before in the last couple of weeks, it's definitely entering a new phase, I would call it, where, okay, we're not going to get as much content as we were once before, about a year or 2 years ago. But it is kind of a nice thing because it causes us to kind of reflect on projects in a little bit more depth, have a little bit more time to think about them rather than just turning our heads and going to the next thing. You know what I mean? So it's cool in a certain way to kind of take things on a slower approach,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, like that's funny you bring up actors and wanting to be in Star Wars, Chris, because that was actually my week in the Star Wars this week. So perfect transition there. So yeah, for me this week, I actually listened to an interview with the new Superman, David Cornsweet. He's actually, so he has a couple buddies that run like a really small podcast. Like their YouTube channel only has like 300 or 400 subscribers. Like it's new. Like, they've been doing a podcast for a while and just growing slowly and whatnot. And since they were roommates with David Cornsweet in college, they had him on, and like he was on there talking, and he was talking about his like fitness stuff for Superman, and talking about like, their podcast is about like style and clothing and stuff. So, whatever, not really something I'm into. But anyways, they got to an interesting point in the podcast. They asked David Cornsweet, like, hey, if you weren't playing Superman, like, what would be a different, like, dream role for you? and he said, "Oh, easily like, if he could play in another franchise, or eventually at some point, it would be playing a Jedi in Star Wars because, that's like, he was viewing that as like a in Star Wars and stuff, and he said of course, his favorite trilogies like the OT and stuff, and they briefly touched on it, but I was like, hey, that's awesome. Like if he does good at Superman, who knows? Maybe Star Wars eventually gives him a look. I mean, from what I've heard, he's a good actor. Like I mean, he's been in a lot of smaller projects and things, but it seems like he's a good actor. He has a good attitude, that's for sure. Like on that podcast, he was pretty much as chill as all three of us are. Just real laid back, cool, really cool guy. So it was great hearing him say that, and I was just like, dang, maybe eventually we'll see Superman playing as a Jedi.
Oh yeah, I'm not familiar with this actor's work at all, which is kind of a cool thing because when you're taking the role on of a legendary character like Superman or Batman or something, it is kind of nice to have an actor kind of cut his teeth with that being their breakout role. So then you think about that actor and you're like, oh, that's Superman, right? Like the same way I look at Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker or Adam Driver as Kylo Ren. Like these actors that were kind of Daisy Ridley as Rey, right? These characters are just synonymous. These actors are synonymous with the characters they play. Harrison Ford, Han Solo, but then Harrison Ford's a little different because he was in a bunch of other stuff besides the point. But no, that's cool. Yes, these are the kind of stories. These are the kind of stories that hold us together in these podcasts on a weekly or semi-weekly basis. So that's cool stuff there.
Oh yeah.
We're going to shoot from the hip on the story because I want to make sure I get to it before Skywalker's Academy leaves our chat. Hopefully he stays or they stay the entire time. So Skywalker's Academy just says saying more Clone Wars flashbacks. So I don't know if you guys knew because this came out, I think, today. So LA Comic-Con, which, man, that is apparently a very big Comic-Con that I didn't even know about as far as like accolades. They've had huge people there all weekend long in LA. And apparently Ewan McGregor was there, like a Star Wars panel with all these actors. It's like, whoa, this came out of left field that this convention was even happening. And apparently Ewan is like candidly talking about Lucasfilm might be looking into Kenobi Season 2. He said this on a panel. And he actually went into the specifics like, yeah, I'm really looking forward to basically putting on Clone Wars armor, which would obviously signify like, oh, there's going to be Clone Wars flashbacks if this thing actually gets greenlit. So I don't know, Milton or Ben, if you heard about this, because it literally just came out. Like I didn't even have time to write it down in our notes, but I mean, that's interesting. I would love to see it. Like, give me Clone Wars, Ewan McGregor. That's going to be awesome if it ever happens. And I don't think there's anybody out there that wouldn't want to see that happen. So let's get that going somehow.
Well, I'm about to say we kind of touched on this a little bit last week about what we would love to see in general, and like what we know shows get canceled all the time, and we don't ever get to finish their stories. But I think with a show like Obi-Wan, I mean, I think in a lot of ways it's justified to get a season 2, and I think the best way to talk about the progression of Obi-Wan Kenobi is to talk about his life as General Kenobi and be flashback form, and how he is learning from the ways of, hey, this is what we did was wrong. So let's see what they did as a Clone War general and his flashbacks, while reflecting that onto the modern day story of Obi-Wan Kenobi when he's transitioning into Ben. I mean, I think that's smart. I mean, I talked about this last week when I told you about the original writer for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, who was going to make it into a trilogy of films. And he said, his story was going to touch on 3 parts. There's going to be Obi-Wan Kenobi, General Kenobi, and then Master Kenobi, and how those 3 elements of him would then transition him into Ben Kenobi, and how he looks back on and say, hey, we failed as a master, as an order, and as a general. What we did was wrong. We clearly didn't do everything right, and clearly he showed how he failed Anakin in his own opinion. So I think this makes sense, and I think the interview that Star Wars Theory did with that writer may have maybe sparked something to where now Obi-Wan or Ewan McGregor maybe talked to Lucasfilm Disney and said, hey, there's still more there we can touch upon. Yes, we set up season 1, but there's more meat on the bone that we can still tell. We can still go further into that 19 years of what was he doing in the desert? What was he doing on Tatooine
Hmm.
while Luke was being raised by his family? But no, this Clone Wars idea of us touching back on this and really getting an idea and expanding that story only makes sense because majority of fans who are Star Wars fans love the Clone Wars from season 1 till season 7 or whatnot. It progressively got better. We love those characters. It fleshed out more of those characters from the movie perspective. So to get more of that in the live action, I'm all about it.
Oh yeah, I mean, anytime we see like any like Clone Wars prequel stuff represented, especially in live action these days, you see like the internet just go abuzz, like go aflame. Like you just see the reference that it has really garnished, especially with Clone Wars Super Battle Droids and Mandalorian. Then obviously Ahsoka, we're seeing an entire battle, and we can't forget that a couple things here. We can't forget that at Celebration Europe, Obi-Wan, yeah, he's synonymous with Obi-Wan. I was about to say Ewan was Obi-Wan. Ewan McGregor was on the panel in the middle of thousands of screaming fans, and he said, "Let's do 7, 8, 9, 10." Like, he came out. Ben, you always tell me about this part where he just comes out of the blue. Like, I don't even think he was scheduled to be up on that stage. Like, I think he just like took over the stage for like a minute. Just to be there with the fans, say, "Let's do it again, 7, 8, 9, 10." Like, that always cracks me up the way he just like delivered that. It's like you could tell like Lucasfilm PR was probably like, "Oh crap, what do we have him do?"
But he's the perfect PR person to drive
Yep.
that particular character because he's the guy. Like he's synonymous with Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I just think it's smart. It's not like he's a character that no one's interested in. It'd be different if someone said, "Oh, let's do a season 2 on Asajj Ventress." I like Asajj Ventress, but she ain't that interesting. You know, I mean, Obi-Wan Kenobi is one of the main staples of this franchise, of this universe. I mean, yes, Darth Vader is the face of the franchise. Obi-Wan's a 1B of the franchise. If someone put Ewan McGregor or Sir Alec Guinness, most people associate those people as Obi-Wan Kenobi. So I think it's just smart to get him out front. And you know what? I'd rather ask for forgiveness than get permission because this may be the best thing for this franchise besides what they're trying to do with the franchise moving forward. But yeah, to tell a great story for this particular great character and give us more to flesh out, I'm all about it. Just tell a rich story and we're good.
And look what he's been doing recently. I mean, he was just recently getting a Hollywood star on Hollywood Boulevard. Him and Hayden Christensen were there. And
Yeah.
I didn't report on this for a podcast because it was busy. That I don't know what happened. It slipped through the cracks. I didn't report on the story. But basically, we could look this up. You guys could look this up, everybody watching, listening. Like, they actually, you can find it on YouTube where it's like him, Hayden, and Ewan were talking on mic. And it was like, if you listen to it as a prequels fan, you might get choked up actually listening to it. Because, like, it was like, oh my gosh, you could tell, like, these guys are actually brothers in real life. Like, they're not just, like, they went through so many years of filming the prequels together. And you could just tell the bond they have goes past the screen. And these guys have kept connected. That was heartwarming as heck to hear about, like, the speech that Ewan gave and Hayden was saying a few words, like, in front of the whole people out there on Hollywood. It's awesome. So, yeah, there you go, Ben.
Oh yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that you guys said. Like you said, like you both said, really, like with Ewan, I feel like it's really with a lot of the prequel actors in general. If you guys have noticed, they really, I think it's because they went through like such a hardship when they were doing the prequels, like, you know, backlash and things. I think that's why they like are so like gracious and appreciative to the fans now, like how they're being treated, because like any of the prequel actors you see, like Ewan, Hayden, Natalie, like all of them, whenever they talk about like stuff with the fans, like they're always really like well spoken. And even I just seen Ahmed Best. He was at a con and he was like just up there like cracking jokes about different things and everything, and it was pretty funny. And you know, it's just great seeing these prequel characters be involved and or like just be out there and talking in the media and like that to me is like the direction Star Wars should be heading toward, like putting these people that are focusing on like more of the positive sides of Star Wars. Like, you never hear, I don't want to like call it any actors in Star Wars, but like you never hear Ewan or Hayden say like, oh, these fans did this to me or that to me. They just talk about the positive fans and move on. They don't talk about anybody that hated on them. They're just like, hey, we're really grateful for like the fans that are watching us now, yada yada yada. And that's how they roll. And it's refreshing when you hear a lot of these people talk, and like even out of like some of the newer actors, like Rosario Dawson's really good in the media too. Like she's always so like appreciative about Ahsoka and like just how she communicates it. She does such a good job. Or even like Dave Filoni behind the camera, he's always really good. So I just think it's just great seeing these prequel people be out and about and pushing for that. And I wholeheartely agree with both of you guys. Like, I would love to see Ewan, like, give us, even if it's like something small, like a 6-episode mini series, like 1 season Clone Wars, something.
Yeah, I mean, you can't forget that Ewan has a lot of power at Lucasfilm. I mean, first of all, he was an executive producer on the series, so he already has more power than the average actor. He's able to actually voice like creative decisions and things like that of that nature. So the idea that we have Filoni in power as the chief creative officer, the CCO, which wasn't the case when Obi-Wan was coming out, I believe. So there's a lot more leadership change at Lucasfilm, so we can actually see him, and also just like a star themselves, as big as Ewan, always has more pull than, let's say, a producer and different things like that for the most part. Like, these guys are the face of the franchise. They can actually have quite a bit of pull on certain things.
No, I agree. And I think a lot of it has to do with, too, like, with looking at the resurgence of the appreciation for the prequels and how these actors are a little more vocal. And because I think, one, the fans understand, like you mentioned, Ben, the hardships that these guys went through. Not saying these people were, serving in Iraq or nothing like that. That's not what I mean when I say hardships.
In the film context.
What we mean is like, the criticisms of the industry in the late '90s, mid 2000s, and maybe a couple years after that.
Threats.
Yeah, like, so look at Jake Lloyd, look at Ahmad Best, like look at George Lucas. Just got tired of dealing with the drama. He's like, hey, I'm not making it anymore, because people didn't like him, or people were just too vocal in a nature that was negative. And that's fine to criticize, but I think, honestly, as a fan base, and this is just me calling out people as I've gotten older, I don't think people really understood what they really were watching, or they really understood what was being presented to them at that time. I don't think Star Wars fans were quite ready for that type of expansion of the franchise. I think they were so used to seeing it so gritty from the 70s and 80s, which that was that time, and it worked. It was great. But George was trying to tell a more elegant story of how the golden age of the Jedi were around, and how prestige it was, and how mystical it was prior to the fall of, the new of the Jedi Order. And I think fans weren't really quite sure what that looked like. I don't think they were ready for it. I think that had a lot to do with the critiques and the way they viewed it. But then I think as we've gotten older, and those same fans are probably thinking, well, George actually made some really good films. He was telling some really good stories. Were they perfectly executed? No, but I think a good 80% of it works. And that 20% needs some adjustment, but it ain't trash. But yeah, I think fans now are understanding and maturing with it. They're like, okay, this really was good Star Wars, and this is what we actually do miss about it.
Oh yeah, for sure. So we'll tell you guys as soon as we find out more. Hopefully we get official confirmation at some point. Maybe make a big splash at a little convention happening in Japan in a couple months there. All right, so we're going to move into the show proper. Good opening there with some shooting off the hip topics. Get into our actual planned topics here. But as always, we're always live Sundays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Now we are going to run into a couple snags at the end of this month with Comic-Con and with Halloween, so we'll keep you guys up to speed on when we'll be going live again, but we'll definitely be back next weekend. As far as podcasts, yes, we are a podcast, so that means you can listen to us anywhere, at the gym, in the car, at work, whatever. Just search Outer Rim Transmission on all of your podcast streaming services such as Spotify and Apple. And please, on anything you watch or listen to us, give us the thumbs up if it's available. Let us know in the comments how we're doing. We're trying to build this positive Star Wars community here on the youtube.com/Starrapter channel. So getting into our first story, this one's a bit of fun here. And there's a C-3PO collectible that's coming. So this is something neat. This basically, like, from Empire Strikes Back, classic. We're seeing that we have the Chewbacca lifting the head and reprogram, trying to get him turning on after Bespin Cloud City. This is cool. It's got electronics, just a bunch of really high-end detail in this thing. So this is going to be available on October 16th at the Disney Store and at Disney Parks. I just like to point this out because this is something unique. It's not an action figure. It's not the 200th helmet that they've released for some character. This is something a little bit different, and it's not actually from Hasbro. So that's, good on Disney for developing this. Oh my gosh, it looks like you could take the plate gold off of his head and actually see him like episode 1 wires exposed C-3PO. So this thing is fully loaded. Oh my gosh, you could actually switch its eye LEDs to turn red like in Rise of Skywalker. So this is part of the Galactic Archive series. I don't know if you guys would have any interest in having this as part of your collection.
I mean,
No,
I
I'm
think
good.
I'm not a C-3PO collector, but it is cool just seeing like those sorts of things out there. Like it does give me flashbacks to the old like figures from like the mid 90s, because there was like a Chewbacca with like a busted up C-3PO back in the day. So that's kind of what it reminded me of.
Right.
Yeah, if I had unlimited space and budget, then yeah, this thing would definitely be in my collection. But I'm not the biggest C-3PO fan. He's fine, but if I were a C-3PO fan, yeah, I would be buying this. Like if he was one of my favorite characters,
right.
I would definitely be buying this.
I mean, look, let's be real here. There's a market. That's why they made it. You know what I'm saying? So I guarantee you, the guys or the ladies over at Rancho Obi-Wan out in California, they'll probably get this and store it in that archive.
Oh my gosh, I got to make a pilgrimage there one day. I guess I just put it out there on the internet, which means I have to do it at some point in my life.
It's funny though. Like I said to my fiance about eventually going out to Lucasfilm, or not Lucasfilm, Skywalker Ranch.
Yeah.
To check that out, because that'd be just so dope to be out there. But also checking out Rancho Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
So it just makes sense to hit.
Oh my gosh.
Everything.
Yeah, you could stop at the Lucasfilm headquarters, which is right by the Golden Gate Bridge. Then you go to Skywalker Ranch, and then you go to Rancho Obi-Wan. It's like the trifecta. I'm not sure where Rancho Obi-Wan is.
Yeah.
Is that in California? I know it's like the Northwest somewhere.
Yeah, it's in California.
Oh, okay. So there you go. I mean, that would be one of my next trips too, is just exploring the Northwest. Like I've done SoCal, loved it, but definitely want to see, sites like where the Endor battle was filmed with the Redwood Forest, like the classic spots you got to visit if you're going up there if you're a Star Wars fan. So,
right.
Yeah, good
stuff.
Yeah,
that's in is that Oregon or Washington State? One of the two states. I think it's Washington State, which is the Redwoods, which would be kind of dope. Do check that out.
Yeah, plus, Lost World Jurassic Park, one of my favorite movies with the compies attacking the guys trekking through there. Like, that looked just like straight out of the same place. So, it was funny enough because my girlfriend just came back from Oregon and she was in those, like, enchanting forest areas. And I literally said, oh my gosh, you were, like, in the Lost World with these waterfalls going down and everything. It's like, take me with you next time. If only I had so much PTO. But getting into our show proper, now I'm going to let you spin this one off, Ben, because I know you read in detail this whole thing. Is what we're talking about here is this broke to us from Variety. And a lot of these studios have been not getting as much praise and as much attention with their series and their movies as they would hope. There's a stronger contingent of fans that they dub the toxic fandom, which can comprise a lot of different individuals according to their criteria. But generally, the studios are trying to come up with a way to battle this, according to them. And one of them is simply ignoring the trolls out there, ignoring them, just pretending they don't exist, prop up the people that are positive, shout them out, get the word out positively. But another thing that was really stirring the internet this week is the idea of creating what they dub the Superfan focus groups. So they would have these people, come in and help out with, is this going to be a good way to market this? No, maybe you guys should try something else. Or, but Ben, as far as this, would this entitle them to do some stuff creatively with these focus groups? What's going on? I know you looked at this.
Yeah, so I of course I had to really read this article in depth because, I've seen plenty of folks online taking this completely out of context. Context is key when it comes to a lot of these articles and stories when we're getting them, no matter where they're from. And like I texted in our group chat, props to Variety on making a good headline for an article to get eyeballs on it. But if they would have honestly made the title a little more not as clickbaity, I feel like it wouldn't have got as much traction because putting toxic fandom and things like that in the title, that gets eyeballs on it. It does, because negativity sells nowadays. And, when you get into the article, the meat and potatoes of it, you read through the first 70% of the article, it's giving a lot of examples of toxic fandom with Star Wars and The Boys and House of the Dragon and yada, yada, yada. And then you get to it, and the meat and potatoes of the article is basically Hollywood studios. They've always used focus groups. They have to test audience test screens and for movies or shows or products, etc. Yep. And they're kicking around the idea of super fan groups to go and basically what they're wanting to do is they're wanting to use super fans to judge their marketing material. And a lot of people are taking this article out of context and taking it as giving super fans giving creative input, which that's not what this was, really. So the thing is, basically that's the jux of it. Is they're talking about them being involved in the marketing process and basically asking hey, a hardcore fan, does this thing of Luke Skywalker look good? Basically, or does this thing of whatever scene the Battle of Yavin look good for this marketing spot? And you have that, and basically that's basically what it comes down to is the marketing side of things.
Yeah,
it's not necessarily the creative, but they even noted in the article they typically don't take creative input from groups like these just because these are a lot of times used for marketing research. Yeah, no,
so as far as this kind of the easiest thing to compare this against is the Acolyte, right? Yep. That's why a lot of this stuff has been really turning around lately online. But you look at this thing, and this makes sense because before the show was even out, people had an opinion about the show, which in effect would mean that there was something probably wrong with the marketing, right? The marketing is to get people to get interested in something, to buy in, to get hyped for it. So apparently there was something wrong with marketing if people were already downvoting this thing and whatnot. So, right, would that work? Am I crazy? I don't know anything about this sort of topic really, but I'm just trying to come up with ideas.
Well, I do have like experience like with marketing materials and things like that. So like I have an idea on it, and like a lot of it does come down to, we've seen it plenty of times before with PR. PR, like I hammer the table PR so much it's probably annoying at this point, but it's true. It's all about PR. For example, like I said, I don't want to like throw shade at any actors or things or creatives, but not even to point out anybody specific. Look at a lot of the folks that were involved with the Acolyte, the way they talked about the fans, even though a lot of them highlighted, I think we talked about it before with you, Milton, like, they tend to highlight the tiny 5% of the audience versus focusing on the 95% of the people that are just normal fans. And like, then you have folks like Ewan, we just talked about it a little bit ago. Ewan, I've never heard Ewan talk about the negative fans once other than his past like 20 years ago or whatever. Like I've never heard him say the toxic Star Wars fandom. I've never heard him say that. So like, it's just the Acolyte had a lot of bad will brought up. You do have bad faith people. You do. You really do. But you also have a lot of folks that are behind the scenes as well in the show that are not helping. They're putting their foot in their mouth when they're going out and focusing on the negative stuff versus the positive. Like, this is what brought to me my example early this morning. I'm sure you guys seen it in our group chat. At like 5:45 this morning when I was working out, I was like, oh, here's my example. It's fairly simple. Okay, think about, you go to a restaurant. You have 4 customers. You have a customer that likes the food, a customer not a big fan of the food, but, we'll deal with it, whatever. Then you have a customer that is just like in love with the food. Everything's perfect. There's nothing wrong with the restaurant whatsoever, and we just worship this restaurant. And then, we worship like whatever waiters and cooks and things that are there. And then you have a super rude customer that's rude to the waiters, rude to the staff, doesn't like anything they serve, etc. You have those 4 types of customers. And to me, that's a perfect example of what Star Wars fandom has become. You have the normal customers that are just like, yeah, it's good, yeah, it's bad, whatever. And then you have like the small minority, like for example, the normal customers would make up 95% of the restaurant, and then you just have the 2 or 3 bad apples in the corner. And then from the super negative customer, they're saying the normal person that likes the restaurant is just shilling for the restaurant when they're not. They're just liking the restaurant. And then on the flip side of that, you have like the people that think everything's perfect, which we have that in Star Wars fandom. And if, they're looking at the customer that's not a huge fan of the restaurant, but whatever, they're looking at that customer saying, oh, they're just a hater. They just hate this restaurant because they have an agenda against this restaurant. When it's just like, no, that person just isn't a big fan of the restaurant. And like, that's what Star Wars has become. You have the big majority of the audience, and then you have these small little toxic things. And that's what triggers me so much on this whole topic, because it's like Star Wars focuses so much on these toxic fandoms. And like, to me, like, I'll end my little salvo here. To me, like, the toxic fandom thing, it's such a weak argument for the studio, because it's such a small portion of the audience. And like, even the one of the executives from Star Trek in that article, he noted it. Even it's such a small portion of the audience. They don't even make up a 5-10% of it. It's just people with a loud bullhorn, and they're still not affecting the masses. Toxic people on Twitter aren't affecting any of our 3 parents whatsoever. They don't even know Twitter exists. So like, that's my thing. I just feel like Star Wars tends to focus on this stuff too much. And I do think, like, to kind of twist this idea from Variety around that they put out there, instead of it just being a superfan focus group, I wish it would be more of a superfan consultant group on, like, not just marketing material, but how to interact with fans. Like, get the people that really that are normal loving Star Wars fans, get the people that are normal critiques of Star Wars, get them in a room and be like, okay, guys, this is what works, this is what doesn't work. And like, just hash it out. Don't get any of the extreme ends. That's my thing. And I feel like they could find a happy medium with a fan group like this. It's just you gotta have a balance.
Oh yeah, that's what my thought was. Like, you gotta have a way of, investigating these people's backgrounds. Like, just don't get any Joe Smo here. Like we got to get people that actually have a good head on their shoulders, that aren't going to run the risk of, oh man, this guy can influence all this stuff, and there's got to be checks and balances. But I mean, yeah, how often do we come on here? We're like, oh, this thing could have been different. This feels like it's not what the fans should be getting, or something like that. Like there's been a lot of quotes I've seen online from my personal friends and stuff that were like, this could have been better, blah blah blah, for this reason why,
Yeah. I mean, look, I think to piggyback off of what you guys are talking about, especially with Ben's comments, I think this could be a smart idea, or this could be a disastrous idea. Depends on how Lucasfilm Disney wants to approach this. Okay, I haven't had a chance to read the article, so excuse my ignorance if I screw something up. But
basically, just really quick here. The only producer that was involved in this article was a Star Trek person. All the other studios who commented remained anonymous, and their reasonings was they were basically scared of being attached to the article just so people wouldn't overreact. But continue.
Okay. But yeah, so like if they want to have a focus group to discuss how to market their movies, their products, or whatnot, I mean, it's been going on for hundreds, or let's say 50 plus years with marketing, just with Pepsi's or cola or outfits, toys, whatever. Focus groups has always been part of business. Obviously, that's how people get an understanding of their market, what works for the communities, what works for the populations, how they market to certain populations. And that's not uncommon, so that makes sense. Obviously, with movies, because it's so subjective, especially with a Star Wars property that has a lot of passion when it comes to people's childhood, the way they view their families, the way they view their relationships, it's tied into that. And I think that's a good thing that we can utilize to help build the product. If they use it to build the product in a positive light that is somewhat satisfying to the majority of the fans, great. You can't please everybody, so I get that piece. I do think there needs to be caution with this, because you're right, Ben. There could be a focus of, let's just focus on the negative comments that we're getting and try to reamp and make it work for them, when really those people probably can't be pleased. Those people just want everything to I mean, look, if it was up to the fans, we'd have some outlandish ideas when it comes to Star Wars, and that doesn't always work. Now, there have been some fans out there who make their own fan videos and fan edits and whatnot, who do great things, and that'd be an awesome opportunity for those people to sit in on those focus groups and say, hey, this is why I went this direction, and this is why I think the fans gravitated towards this compared to what you guys were trying to do. I think they need to do something like that. I think I touched on that last week. You have a lot of great amateur filmmakers and storytellers who are just on YouTube themselves making great stories because they take the time to understand the lore, and they write a product where they feel that will be, one, satisfactory to the fans, but also in continuity and in respect to what the product currently is and what it was. So I think this is where you can utilize that particular super fan group, whatever they're calling it, focus group, to help with their marketing, to help with their storytelling. That, I think, is a way to go about it. Now, if they're just doing it to placate, it's not going to work, because you're not going to be able to have the real hard conversations about products and what you're trying to do, because you can't let the fans totally dictate what you're trying to do. That's just like, this is an example, that's like allowing your toddler child to dictate how you parent them, and they're only 2 or 3 years old. A toddler should not dictate how they should be parented, because they don't know better. You know what I'm saying? So, like, to me, you have to see that checks and balances, know when you need to get into the fire, know when you shouldn't, know when you actually need to be the parent and say, no, this is the best way to market this, and this is why. The science backs it up. The data backs it up. But no, it could be a disastrous idea, but also could be a great idea if they utilize it correctly.
Yeah, it really becomes on what the future is. Like, let's say, hopefully it doesn't happen, the next 3 series that come out and they just fall flat again, like how the Acolyte was. they got nothing to lose at that point. If I were Disney, I'd be like, yeah, we better get we better have a change here. Let's get a couple of these guys in here, these girls, and let's hash out what they like about Star Wars, what we're doing wrong, and try to get this ship back on course, because it's not been all rainbows and sunshine. Let's face it.
Right.
Like it's been more misses than hits, I gotta say. And there only comes a time where it's like, okay, you guys have done this so many times, like, we got to get something here, or else this brand is just going to fade into non-existence anymore. So if it becomes to that dire, let's say 3 years go by and we're still in the same part, then I would say they got nothing to lose,
Right. Well, and you can look at it in terms of sports. I mean, sports franchises rebuild all the time. So if a sports franchise is going through a rebuild, knowing that, hey, we've had success for 20 plus years. I mean, look at the Patriots. The Patriots were the most dominant sports franchise in the NFL from 2001 to the last year Tom Brady played for them, which was 2019, 2020. The San Antonio Spurs were one of the most dominated basketball franchises from 1999 to 2019, 2018 when Tim Duncan played. Dominant. They had a formula that worked for them. Star Wars was dominant from 1977 until, let's say, 2005 when the prequels were finished. But they went through a rebuild kind of because of that dark period of time and what was going on, and they had to rebuild their franchise. Obviously, Clone Wars was that slow rebuild, and Clone Wars really got better and better and better, and people loved it by the end. But then there went a sort downhill after the Last Jedi and Solo. I think at that point, Star Wars didn't quite know how to course correct itself. That's where I think they should have gone back to the drawing board and say, hey, what worked for us? What doesn't? Let's bring in the proper people that can really get us back on track. And that's when he probably should have utilized the fans and said, hey, what works here? What doesn't work? And really do put the money and time in to say, hey, why didn't this hit for you? Why do you think this wasn't there for you? And then get that feedback, because I think a lot of times they choose to ignore. Excuse that sound in the back. That's my neighbor's car going off for some reason. But they choose to ignore, I think, some of the fans when they try to get negative. I'm not saying you have to acknowledge the super toxic ones. I think that doesn't always help. But also, don't just act like and stick your head in the dirt and say, hey, there's really no negativity here. I think that's where I think Star Wars loses themselves. Because they get so arrogant thinking that no one can touch them. It's the fans are loud. And if you choose to ignore them, that's when they get louder. So learn when to ignore them, learn when not to.
Yeah, there's a couple of paragraphs I do want to read verbatim from the article that have to do with actors and social media for PR and stuff like that, which I feel like are things to get into. I know Ben has mentioned that a few times in the past couple episodes. So taking it from this point, quote, those who did talk with Variety all agreed that the best defense is to avoid provoking fandoms in the first place. In addition to standard focus group testing, studios will assemble a specialized cluster of superfans to assess possible marketing materials for a major franchise project. They were very vocal, says the studio exec. They will just tell us, if you do that, fans are going to retaliate. These groups have even led studios to alter the projects, quote, if it's early enough and the movie isn't finished yet, we can make those kinds of changes, quote. Another one here is several studio insiders say they often put their talent through a social media boot camp of sorts. In some cases, when a character is intentionally challenging a franchise's status quo, studios will, with the actor's permission, take over their social media accounts entirely. When things get really bad, especially involving threats of violence, security firms will scrub talent information from the internet to protect them from doxing. So those are some pretty massive statements there in this Variety article. So, yeah, this is crazy. Going back to the second paragraph I was reading, when there's quotes from the studio exec saying that, if it's early enough that the movie isn't finished, we can make those kind of changes based on focus groups. That's kind of extreme.
I think your prime example of that, I can't think of any live action off the top of my head. Prime example would be the reaction to the Sonic the Hedgehog. I think Sonic 2. That was the prime example, because remember, Sonic. Yep, I'm gonna say that
Okay.
was the big example I thought of when it came to that. Was I was like, I bet you the person commenting that was part of the Sonic project, because like that's to me is the most recent example of feedback from fans and then the studio is changing something. So like,
Yeah, well, yeah, because he looked like shit.
yep,
Like that Sonic, look, just keeping it 100. Like, go back to that original trailer. I'm thinking like you knew it was Sonic, but the way he looked was off, and I'm like that don't seem right. And a lot of people were like, huh? But then like 6 months later, whatever it was, they
yep.
reamped this look, and I'm like, that's Sonic. That's what we remember. Yes, he's a little more live
The
action.
movie was really good.
The movie was really good.
Really good, better than what it was. I'm like, you guys definitely listen to the fans, and you're like, oh, we effed up. So let's
Yes.
course correct this.
Yeah.
That's how you should do it. Like that's actually probably the perfect example of
Mm-hmm.
listening to the fans and the feedback and saying, oh yeah, they're
Exactly.
right. Because looking at the source material, that definitely does not look like the original Sonic. It looks kind of like some poor man version of it. That's like me going on clip art back in 1998. You know what I'm saying? And like coming up with the Sonic. Like no, like you have the technology.
I
Yeah,
feel
I
like
mean-
they were really trying to go for like that really like realistic, seamless look of like, okay, how do we make a hedgehog like morphed into a mutant and make him look good next to a live action
But that's
actor?
overkill though.
And then it was
Yeah,
like,
and
wait, that just looks horrifying.
Yeah, it looks even worse, and that's where I think the studios get themselves in trouble. Well, I'm gonna say they overdo it. They get in their own way. It's like don't try to reinvent the wheel, bro.
They get too cute.
Yeah, like don't try to reinvent the wheel. Don't get super cute. And like I said, you can never allow these hardcore superhead fans to be in control because they're just too extreme. But if you listen to the mass majority who are saying, "Hey, we love what you're trying to do," you just got to retweak it because that's not clearly what we're wanting to see. And Sonic did a good job at saying, "Hey, they're right. Let's do it better."
Yes.
And let's acknowledge we messed this up, and then they course corrected it, and that franchise is doing great. I can't wait for the third movie because he
Yes.
looks great, he sounds great, he's very much the character that I remember as a child.
Uh-huh.
Even with Knuckles looked
Ooh.
awesome. Tails is perfectly done. They have mastered that franchise to look the way it looked like in the games, but made it better.
Yes,
Because they listened to the fans and they course corrected it.
exactly. That franchise would have never gotten past the first movie if they would have kept that
Never.
model. I predict that would have
just
never
dug
got a
in.
sequel. And then they doubled down. They have an incredible series that I love that came out earlier this year called Knuckles, which is like the standalone in between Sonic 2 and 3. Fantastic. It was honestly one of the funniest things I've seen in a long time. I can't tell you how many times I laughed out loud, and I don't really do that a lot watching things, so I was audibly laughing every episode. I was loving it. And now they have Keanu Reeves signed up to play Shadow. It's like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
this is freaking
Great.
perfect. They're bringing Jim Carrey
He
out of
looks good.
retirement to play the guy again.
Shadow looks awesome. Yeah, Shadow looks great. I mean, like Jim Carrey, like I never would have thought I would envision
I know.
Jim Carrey being the Eggman professor, but like that works. And looking at the character in the game, he's goofy. I'm going, oh, that works. But again, I think the studios did a really good job at listening to the proper criticism, not the BS stuff, like the actual
Yes.
saying, hey, like this isn't looking that good. But we like where you're going with it. Just you got to change this character's look. You know, no one critiqued the story for that I know of. No one critiqued the humans element of it. Like we just didn't like the way Sonic looked. And I think, again, going back to this focus group thing, the hardcore super fans, you have to take that with a grain of salt because a lot of those people just can't be pleased. Let's just keep it real. We all love Star Wars. We all love it since we were children. And would I consider us super fans? Maybe, but I would think that we are super fans that have sense who say, hey, let's take a step back and see what they're trying to do first. Instead of saying, oh my God, I don't like that right away, that's trash, I'm done with it, I'm walking away. No, we're going to be reasonable. And that's the type of fan that Star Wars need to be dealing with. Not these superhead fans who are in their mom's basement, they're 40 years old, they can't get a girl, you know what I'm saying, that don't got a job. Yeah, I'm throwing shade at you because it's the truth. But all you super fans who are out there ain't doing nothing with their lives are the problem. You're the ones out here causing problem on Twitter because you got nothing else to do at 5 o'clock in the afternoon where you should be working. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yep.
get off Twitter.
Yep. Well,
But
that's
it's like you can't listen to those fans. Those fans you can't listen to.
the
Listen
thing.
to the ones that are here, that are reasonable, who will disagree with you when it's appropriate, who will probably agree with you when it's right, but also say, hey, let's have a disagreement that's comfortable, that's somewhat conflicted, but also reasonable and rational.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I completely 100% agree with you on that, Milton. Like that even ties into like that next paragraph that Chris read about like, actors getting like death threats and different things and all this
Yeah,
stuff,
that's insane.
from those types of people. And like to me, it's like for one, these are all like just move entertainment franchises at the end of the day. Like there's no place in the world for that sort of behavior.
No.
But like also for two with that, I like another point like Chris had made, like they sometimes the studios will take over the PR or take over the people's social media
Mm-hmm.
accounts, and you can see when a studio is taking over someone's account. Like you've seen plenty of older actors like put out these tweets, and you're like, okay, you can tell a marketing person posted that and not the actor.
Yeah.
Like I mean, look at like half of Tom Brady's tweets on Twitter, like it's marketing junk. But like you know to me, when it comes to those sorts of things, like so much of that stuff is like so important just to like the fan culture of Star Wars. Like that would be like a big hitter for me if I was involved in one of these groups. Was like, hey, you gotta just like, there were talk about like the actors like being put through social media boot camps and
Mm-hmm.
things like that and learning. Well, not to throw any shade, but it feels like Lucasfilm doesn't do any of that, honestly, because you see actors, you see creators. I mean, during The Last Jedi, Ryan Johnson was battling with fans on Twitter back and forth, and like to me, there's no place for that. I don't like if people are like criticizing your movie. Who cares? Like Ryan was out there tweeting like, men babies not liking my movie, yada yada yada, like all these things, and like to me, that's a
Yeah.
massive issue because it's basically from Lucasfilm's perspective. This is my thing. This is like a big umbrella, big picture thing here. Lucasfilm basically is culturing and endorsing a lot of just toxic behavior, even from people that are employed by them. Because, like, to me, I don't think if you're like employed by a company like that, you shouldn't be out there representing the company by arguing with the customers, even if the customers are hardcore critiquing you. Why focus on those tiny little people that are like the small
I'll
minority? Why not focus instead of Ryan Johnson arguing back with people hating him? Why not
I'll say this.
why not tweet back to the people that love him?
Right, and I agree with that, but I will say this.
My thing.
In the defense of any actor that responds to Star Wars fandom who are toxic, I'll say this, and this is where Lucasfilm Disney has failed.
Yep.
John Boyega and the actress that played Reva, what was her name?
Moses Ingram.
Moses Ingram. Yep.
Okay, yeah, Moses. Disney was hush hush doing all that racist shit that was being said about them when
Yep.
Finn was announced. He was a stormtrooper, and then Reva was, the whatever sister she was. I mean, you guys remember the toxicity
Yep.
that they were getting their way, and Disney, Lucasfilm was hush hush. It wasn't until the other actors on those shows were like
Mm-hmm.
responding back to the fans and say, "Hey, that's not no need for it." Because I remember Ewan McGregor was defending
Ewan McGregor
Moses.
Yeah, he
posted
made
a
a
video.
video.
Yeah, he's like, if you're saying that stuff, you're not a Star Wars fan. You know what I'm saying? And
Yep.
even John Boyega himself said during that time when I was there, Disney and them did not say a word to defend
Yeah.
me to come out. I think his coworkers were doing all that. So I understand when actors respond to fans who are being ignorant, bigots, or racist. I'm cool with that. Ryan
Oh yeah.
Johnson, different story. He just made a bad movie, my guy. Now,
Yep.
I'm not saying all the criticism was deserved. Now, if they're taking personal shots at your family or whatever, I get that response. But if someone's saying, "Hey, The Last Jedi was straight trash," fine, move on. You're still getting your $50 million check. You know what I'm saying? You were still going to be promised a trilogy at that point, and hell, you got Knives Out moving forward. So like, there was no need for all his BS back and forth responding because people just were looking for a rise out of him. But if they're attacking your family, I get those responses. If they're being
Yep.
racist, I get those responses. If your employer ain't backing you up, sometimes you got to smack the bully back in the face. So I get why the
Yep.
other actors will respond as they should. But if it's this nonsensical crap where someone's like, "Oh, Milton, you're garbage on the podcast." All right, cool, whatever, move on. You know what I'm saying? Like, but if
Yeah.
someone's saying, "Hey, your mom's trash, your sister's garbage," different story. Then I'm gonna respond back to that.
Yep. Oh yeah, I agree. Like that's the thing. It's like it's finding good balance there. Because it's like, what you should respond to, what you shouldn't. And like the problem is it seems like a lot of like a lot of the younger generation of actors like in their 20s and 30s, a lot of them get so sensitive and like hell bent on like one little Twitter comment, then
Right.
they just start like blanketing fans into certain sections of Star Wars fans because like
I
I
agree
see
with
that
that. You,
I see that from like
you're right. It's definitely unfair. Like they should not do that. They shouldn't blanket all fans into one because some idiots or two are just being stupid.
yep.
But but go to my original point. I get that because if your employer ain't defending you when you're out here sacrificing your time, your efforts into learning your craft and getting better and trying to put the best product out there, and all of a sudden John Boyega is getting attacked left to right and
Yep.
Moses and no one says anything, that's a problem. And I get that response. I understand that 100%.
Yep. Oh yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, now we see how reluctant he is to work with Disney, right? Like he says,
Yeah.
"You're not going to Disney Plus me," like that famous line.
Well, look.
All that. But I mean, time heals some things, and
Well,
so maybe he'll come back one day for the Daisy Ridley
Maybe.
movie. But yeah, there's a lot of changes. I'm sure he wants to assure them that must be made for him to jump on board, as they all should be. It's not right what they did, and you know.
yeah. Well, the big thing with John Boyega, I think one of the big things I'm sure you guys remember that really probably I'm sure personally set him off was like, the whole thing when Disney did the marketing with in Southeast Asia. They on the character posters they had like all the characters and then they like really minimize his character
Forgot about
base
that.
basically because I mean just to call a spade, there were a lot of racist folks in those areas at the time. And like Disney, being Disney worried about money, they really minimized his character on the poster where it looked like a small little character, like it looked like a just an ancillary character. So they made it seem like he wasn't in the movie very much, and that's purely money. And it just to me that's what gets at me too, where it's like you can't just put money above everything else like that. That's where you got to like fester a good marketing thing, like getting back to like our whole Superfan focus group. It's like that's why you get a really diverse group of fans, whether it be like like fans that know their stuff, but like guys, girls, different races, different gender identities, whatever, like all those different things, and just get a good balanced group of like people with good heads on their shoulders that aren't like too extreme one way or the other. And I feel like they could really get good feedback from fans that way. I really do, just because like I'm sure I like Milton with you being African American. I'm sure like if you would have seen that poster of John Boyega, like if I came to you and was like, "Hey, this is our Southeast Asian marketing poster. What do you think of this compared to the one in the U.S.?" And like in the U.S. one, John Boyega looks like he's one of the three leads, and then in the Southeast Asian one, it's like he looks
Mhm.
non-existent. Like how would you give
Right.
feedback on that? Like,
Oh, I'd have been like, well, my professional side, because there's two sides of Milton.
yeah,
There's the professional side of Milton, and there's the non-professional. My professional side would have been like, what is this all about? I said, I've seen this film. I've seen the original North American poster, whatever poster.
yep,
He's literally blue lightsaber right there. Why are we doing this? I'll be flat out asked that. And if they say, well, that region is not really accepting and blah blah blah, then I will say, no, that's not accepting for us as a company, because we should be setting the example of
Mm-hmm.
our product. And yes, I know the South Asian market is important. I don't want to ignore that. However, they're not going to dictate how we treat our own people here.
Yep.
Like, Disney's supposed to be a family company, so I assume when they work with their employees, they're a part of the family. You know what I'm saying? I don't see you guys minimizing Daisy Ridley or Adam Driver or Harrison Ford or Carrie Fisher or whatever. Like so I mean, you might as well minimize them all or keep it the same. That's and I would say you're that powerful enough to where you can make a stand and say we're not doing that, and you're Disney. There's no one's gonna challenge you. You're Disney. You know what I'm saying? Like that's how I would approach it as a professional. Now my non-professional side would say, "What the hell is this? This ain't gonna work for me, pal."
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? It's just I don't know. It's to me, I would have definitely questioned it, try to understand it, and say we need to take a stance as a company and say, no, this isn't going to work because we can't allow this to be the standard moving forward. Like we have to say, listen, this is the standard of our property, of our product, and how we treat our people. They're not just employees; they're family.
No. Yeah. So I mean, getting back to the whole gist of it, the whole gist of the whole thing, right? Is focus groups. Yeah, they can work in some situations. Some we don't want to give these people too much power, or anybody, right? So
Right.
it's a case by case basis. The way I think it's kind of always been. There's, as you said, Milton, they've been using
What's the word?
focus
Like a
groups for
proper
a long
screening
time.
basically is needed.
Yeah. I mean, like you've seen, like I even heard about things like the Borderlands movie. They had a focus group that watched the movie like 6 months prior, and they were like, "This movie is crap. It's not going to do good." And the studio, I guess, tried to make changes, and it's like. It wouldn't work anyway. The way the movie was designed, it was like no matter what you do at that point,
Right.
they got to just release it. They already sunk all this money in, so in some cases things are too far gone. But I mean that's the way it is. So it's an interesting topic for debate, of course. Like the fandom, as I said off the top, is kind of on both sides to a certain degree on this. So we want to hear what your guys' thoughts are in the comment section down below for more on that. Real quick, one last thing. I almost forgot to talk about it. Out this week, we have Inquisitors 4. But one thing I just want to spend just a minute or two on is the fact that, yes, we are finally in the post-Return of the Jedi era with Luke, Han, and Leia with an actual story in the Marvel Comics. I know I was gloating about this quite a bit in a private chat with you guys because me and Matthew broke it down as we always do on the Tractor Beam show every single week. Over on the Star Wars Underworld channel, and it's great. It's great. We get to see Leia actually come into grips with seeing her father's remains, Darth Vader's remains, on Endor, picking up his helmet, having this anger in her because he was part of the reason why her planet was destroyed before her eyes and the Empire and everything else. So it's really like cool, genuine moments with Leia, and then her coming to and then Luke showing up and just getting to her to be like, okay, anger, you can't deal with anger. It was very sage Jedi Luke kind of conversation. Him trying to impart his Jedi ways on her, but she's just coming back on him saying, hey, I am not a Jedi like you. I'm a realist, essentially. Like, this all happened to me. I have to deal with this my own way, sort of thing. So there's a lot of cool stuff like that. We get an intro to a new villain that I think is going to be great. Not really new. He was mentioned already. He was in a Star Wars mobile game, Star Wars Uprising. General Adelhard gassed an entire planet. This guy's ruthless. He worked under the tutelage of Thrawn at one point. Was promoted was promoted by Vader himself. Like, this guy has had a lot of ties to the top brass in the Empire. He is not accepting the Emperor and Vader's defeat. He's putting an iron fist on the galaxy. So what I'm getting at here is this really does feel like an actual sequel to Return of the Jedi so far. There's going to be 12 issues. It's called The Battle of Jakku. It's just Insurgency Rising. There's going to be 4 issues there. And then the next 4 issues is part of another miniseries. And then there's another miniseries after that. So it's like 12 issues in the span of 3 months. They're expediting rather than 1 a month. They're doing like 3 a month. So it's a really cool way. It kind of harkens back to the Thrawn trilogy is what I'm getting at here is, Timothy's on saying, okay, I'm going to make a book or a series, a trilogy of books talking about what happens with these characters. And the same sort of thing is happening here in canon with the fall of the Empire. And I love how, this is written in a way where, empires don't fall in a day, right? Like these things, these battles. Yep. Alex Segura, giving credit where credit is due to the writer on all 12 of these issues, does a really good exploration of, shedding the light on, just because the Emperor and Darth Vader die. It just doesn't topple overnight. And we get to see B-Wings battling TIE Strikers and this guy holding on to his power in his area of his sector of the galaxy, spreading lies, having people killed for treason if they think that if they say that the Emperor's dead. Like all these cool, really neat things here. But I just wanted to kind of shout from the rooftop, so to speak, saying, hey, I know all of us out there have been pining for post-Return of the Jedi content in the books and the comics, and well, the day has finally come, so go ahead, check out your local comic book store to pick up your issues there.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, it's good they're continuing or like getting content right there post Return of the Jedi, just because, like, you know, that's what people enjoyed back in the day with like the Legends material, and it's nice they're continuing it during this era, and then still pounding the table. And I hope one of these days in our group chat we get a big bold message from Chris, like saying, hey guys, 3-book trilogy coming out post episode 9 with Rey, Finn, and Poe. Like, I would love to see something like that. Just give us a standalone 3-book adventure with those 3, and like, you know, that's what would really get me into it. Like, I'm glad they're doing it with Jedi, and then hopefully it'll eventually, like, hopefully this is kind of like a model that'll bleed over into maybe a potential Rise of Skywalker. Even a comic run like this would be good.
Yeah, so if we're looking for something like that, okay, we're gonna have to wait 10 years for the stories after Rise of Skywalker, basically. Is what you're saying. It's just
I mean at this rate we're almost there. I
mean the worst thing that happens is you come out with I always say Rise of the Resistance, which is the Resistance Reborn, where they're obviously going off of the Colin Trevorrow script. And then Rebecca Roanhorse makes the book, and we're like, wait, why does this not even track with, Rise of Skywalker at all? It's because it was on based off an old script. So that's the risk you run when you're doing like a story like that, where it's in an unwritten timeline. It's like, oh, well, there's always a chance that a creator can get messed up, and you have to do the whole thing over again, and the book doesn't really sit right. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that will begin to wrap things up for episode 171 of Outer Rim Transmission. It was great to have the full crew back again this week on the show. Where can the people follow you, Milton?
Oh, they can follow me on Twitter at MiltonWeber7 or Instagram at Milton7Weber. Hit me up in other platform. Usually I try to keep it positive and low key. Hopefully you guys have a good rest of the week, and I appreciate you guys watching or listening.
Certainly, Ben.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at RealBenMaynard, always just sharing fitness stuff, Star Wars stuff, or football stuff at the moment. Yeah, those are about the main things. And then also a little shout out to any of our listeners that are like in the southern part of the country, like Florida and those regions, because another big hurricane's coming. So like, stay safe, guys, if anyone's in those parts.
Yeah, it's hurricane season is real right now, man. Like,
Yep.
Prayers for everybody out there, and just be safe. Just be safe. And as far as me, I'm on Twitter posting skateboarding videos again. I know we talk about Milton posting workout videos. I know, Ben, you've been dabbling here and there. Yep. Well, there you go. I'm going to promote my own videos, darn it. Skateboarding videos. So there we go. I got the full pads on that time, and that was right before I got a nice size hematoma after doing an acid drop into a quarter pipe. I know it sounds like something really bad. No, I don't do acid. No, that's actually a trick. So I got a big old swelled bruise on my hip, which is the only pads I don't have is for my hips because, well, unless I want to be like a football player in gear, which might not be the worst idea running out there skating. But hey, that's the rite of passage for a skater, right? But you can find me on twitter.com/Starrapter, posting videos like that. And you can also find us right here on the Starrapter YouTube channel, talking the latest Star Wars. I have my reviews and everything Star Wars related here. That's going to wrap it up, though. For Milton, for Ben, for Chris, aka Starrapter, thank you for tuning in live, everybody that does. Really appreciate it. That's going to do it for us here. Bye-bye, everybody. End transmission.